10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 292. Hey everybody, welcome into our second to last episode in 2021, and this is going to be our Lick of the Month episode. We're going to take a look at the genius of Chris Potter and relate it to some of the stuff that we've been working on in this particular series. So first, just want to thank you all for tuning in yet again, and second, want to let anybody who's new to the podcast know that this is a listener-supported show, which means we do not have any advertisements on the program, and instead we rely on the support of our listeners to keep this show in high quality and coming at you week after week. The way that we do that is through our Patreon site, where you can support your favorite creators directly in the form of a monthly donation. For a small monthly donation, you do get a PDF to every single episode that we've ever done, along with some audio examples as well. So to find that site and get yourself signed up, you can go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and get yourself signed up for instant access to all of that stuff. Wanted to give a quick shout out to our new patron. Thank you to Vincent for becoming a $5 patron. And just so everybody knows, I am making this episode super early because we are headed out on a little mini tour here on December 10th. So if you've signed up, you will get your shout out. It's just that I'm making this a couple of weeks in advance. So thank you to Vincent for signing up to become a $5 patron. Welcome to the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson family. And to all of you that have been signed up for months and even years, thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't thank you enough for keeping this show going. So again, that's 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners. Get yourself signed up today. All right, let's jump into today's episode. So we are going to take a look at an awesome excerpt from one of Chris Potter's solos, and this happens to be on the Charlie Parker tune Scrapple from the Apple. And this is one of his now internet famous clinic a cappella performances. There's lots of these floating around on YouTube where Chris Potter would be giving a clinic somewhere and somebody would ask him to play a tune and he would launch into these sometimes over 10-minute solo performances. And that's what this particular performance is on Scrapple from the Apple. I will include a YouTube link to the performance so that you can check out the entire thing. But this actual part of the transcription comes in around 36 seconds of the actual recording. So you can find it if you want to hear the actual line that I'm giving you. Now, what this particular excerpt does is it pertains to a lot of the rhythmic stuff that we've been talking about on our scale exercises. We've been talking about the fact that we have to develop a certain degree of rhythmic flexibility in order to be great improvisers. And when I think about Chris Potter, he really has command of the entire jazz language. And sometimes some of the stuff he plays seems otherworldly, and it seems like no human being could ever come up with something that sounds that good and has that degree of knowledge behind it and that degree of practice behind it. So it's a great example of how working on some of this stuff that I've presented to you in the 4-part series on creative scale practice can transfer into something that you would actually use in an improvised statement. And I think that Chris Potter does probably the best job of just illustrating what that really, really hard work and developing that flexibility can actually do for you. So as far as Lick of the Month episodes go, this is a rather long excerpt. But it's because we're not really looking at harmonic language this particular time. We're really looking at rhythmic language. So I chose to grab a larger portion of the solo. This is actually a 12-measure portion of his solo that just demonstrates this rhythmic balance so nicely. So first, let's hear it, and then we will talk about it a little bit. So he plays it much faster than that, and it has a greater effect, but I've just slowed it down and put it to a metronome for illustrative purposes on this particular episode. So let's dive in and see what's going on. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is the first three measures, okay? So what he's doing is he's playing starting on the and of 3 in the first bar. He's playing this particular rhythmic pattern that's actually very similar to what we've been talking about on the past 2 episodes. So what he does is he plays an eighth note on the and of 3, then an eighth note rest, then he's playing a 3/8 note segment on the and of 4. Now that pattern repeats 3 times. So in bar 2, we see it start on the and of 2. It's the exact same rhythmic pattern. And then in bar 3, we see it start on the and of 1. And it's the exact same rhythmic pattern. It actually carries into bar 4. So on the and of 4 in bar 3, we see it start again. But what he does is he extends it with more eighth notes. He carries it, he adds 6 eighth notes, which carries him into measure 5. But that's exactly what we've been talking about, taking your scales, using a repeated rhythmic pattern that stays constant, that ends up putting you on different parts of the beats, different parts of the measure, depending on where that falls. That's a perfect example of that over the first 5 measures of this excerpt. Okay, so now if we look at measure 6, we see he starts just a plain old eighth note run. And there's a lot going on here harmonically, but we're not going to get into that in this episode. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to skip to measure 9 and notice this other really cool rhythmic aspect to the excerpt. So starting in measure 9 on beat 1, we see this rhythmic figure that is an eighth note followed by 2 16th notes, okay? Then we see 4 more eighth notes after that. Then on beat 4 of measure 9, we see him reverse that rhythm. And instead of playing an eighth note followed by 2 16th notes, we see 2 16th notes followed by an eighth note. So he's taking that same rhythmic pattern, flipping it. Then if we go to measure 10, we see that rhythmic pattern again back in its original form on beat 2. We see an eighth note followed by 2 16th notes. So Chris Potter is really playing off of this rhythmic figure, but he's keeping you on your toes. You hear the eighth followed by 2 16th notes, and then you hear it reversed, and then you hear it back in its original format. And he does this just brilliantly by putting the first iteration on beat 1 of measure 9, the second iteration on 4 of beat 9, and then the third iteration on beat 2 of measure 10. This is one of my favorite parts about this solo and really, really just demonstrates how much flexibility and mastery of the saxophone and the jazz language that Chris Potter actually has. And then to put a cap on all of this, we see him play 8 eighth notes starting in the second half of measure 10 going into measure 11, and then he finishes up the line with quarter note triplets, which relates directly back to what we were talking about in the last episode using our whole tone scale. So he really runs the gambit on, all these different rhythmic figures, and he just does it so effortlessly. And if you were to look at a transcription of this solo, he actually continues with that quarter note triplet theme for quite a while and gets even deeper into balancing these quarter note triplets with other rhythmic values. So I think we can take a lot from this, but at the very least, it kind of confirms our hypothesis that practicing things in different rhythmic iterations are really going to lead to real life results when we're soloing. So now that we've analyzed it, let's listen to it one more time and hear all of those things that we talked about in action. So I love that opening thing he does with that rhythm of the 1/8 note followed by 8th note rest followed by 3/8 notes. And then of course, one of my other favorite places is when he starts using those 16th notes in a very, very measured way. So really take a peek at those, see if you can turn that into some kind of exercise on your own. We've been talking about setting up these rhythmic schemes. That would be a perfect one. Play an 8th note off the beat, rest for an 8th note, and then play 3/8 notes. And then you'll be playing just like Chris Potter. You will sound just like him. You'll get all of his gigs. I promise you it will work out that way. No, of course, I'm kidding, but it is a good place to start by using a real life jazz musician that we all look up to and figuring out what to work on based off of what he's presenting to us in a real recording. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions. You can get in touch with me on the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook group. You can always email me at 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com. I hope that looking at this excerpt has provided you with as much value as it has for me, and I really, really hope you can take something away from this and actually put it into your own practice routine. All right, we will see you next week with our Tune of the Month episode and our last episode in 2021. Again, I just want to really, really thank you all for such a great year. I've had a lot of fun making these episodes over yet another year, and thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in every week. Thanks for supporting the podcast, all that good stuff. Much appreciation to you guys. As always, hope you're staying safe and healthy out there, and we'll see you next week with a brand new episode. Talk to you soon, everybody. Bye.